Good evening and welcome to the November 14, 2017 regular meeting of the Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Additionally, the agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. State law establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The other individuals seated at the table this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman and Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-on sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, tablets, or any other devices that might disrupt this meeting, please either be placed in silent mode or be turned off. The roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Abhidian.
Here.
Ms. Cruz. Mr. Edmonds.
Here.
Mr. Faison.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Ms. Koopa.
Here.
Mr. Zanzika. Mr. Tagle.
Here.
Ms. Howe.
Here.
Quorum present. Item number 2 on the agenda tonight is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Ms. Koopa, and seconded by Mr. Faison. Roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Edmonds.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Ms. Koopa.
Here. Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian.
Yes. Item number 3 on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the October 24, 2017 meeting of the Planning Commission. Can you get a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Mr. Edmonds moves to approve, and a second. Mr. Krent, a second. Roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Edmonds.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Ms. Koopa.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian.
Yes. Item number 4 on the agenda, public comment for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we move to item number 5 on the agenda, site condominium development review. Preliminary site plan review, file number SP JPLN 2017-0012, proposed Davis site condominium, north side of East Long Lake, east of Livernois, 285 East Long Lake, section 10, currently zoned R1B, one family residential district. Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you and good evening to the Planning Commission and to the public. Director Savadant had just checked with IT to see if we can get the screen that shows the presentation onto the main screen so the public can see what we're discussing tonight. But I will get started. So the applicant tonight is seeking approval for a cluster development of 13 detached lots. The development itself includes 12 new single-family homes, and the existing site, or the existing home on the site, will remain as is. The 5-acre lot fronts on Long Lake Drive, just east of Livernois. The parallel plan presented in the packet tonight shows that under a conventional layout, the applicant would be allowed to develop 10 single-family lots as part of this development. As part of the cluster proposal, the applicant is seeking 3 additional lots through a cluster development. The Planning Commission should be familiar with this project, and the public should be as well, as this was last reviewed by the Planning Commission at the July 25th meeting. At that meeting, the item was tabled, and the comments that were received at that meeting included the comments that the overall design lacks creativity in terms of preservation of natural features. The design requires excessive deviations. The extra units sought by the applicant by providing a bioswale doesn't commensurate with the sustainable design feature. And lastly, the plan doesn't meet the standards of the cluster development. Since that meeting, the applicant has made significant improvements to the plan, And the revised plan includes the elimination of the 14th unit, so now they're only including 13 units. The 14th unit was actually located at the, you can see it in the plan in front of you, is located where the proposed park is going to be located now. And so in addition, by removing that 14th unit, they've actually increased the amount of open space from 30.7% to 37%. So they've increased the open space by 7%. In addition, by removing that 14th unit, they have included a private park for the development, as well as by eliminating that 14th unit, they have removed all deviations that were initially required under the first consideration by the Planning Commission. In terms of area, width, height, and setbacks, the proposed cluster plan meets all the requirements of the cluster ordinance and does meet all the requirements of the R1C district. In addition, the applicant has submitted the required landscaping and has submitted the required tree mitigation. We do want to note that in reviewing the cluster plan, there are 9 standards that the Planning Commission is to review. These include, has the applicant used innovative and creative site design? Has the applicant used a cluster to protect natural features that wouldn't be normally protected under a conventional layout? Has the applicant provided an appropriate buffer to adjacent properties? Is there a compatible mix of open space, landscaped area, and pedestrian amenity? Has the applicant applied sustainable design features? Is the density bonus requested commensurate with the benefit provided through the cluster? And lastly, is the architecture compatible with the surrounding properties? In summary, we do find that the applicant has made significant improvements of their plan set. This includes the removal of a 14th unit, the conversion of that area into a park, the inclusion of 7% more open space than was originally shown on their plan. This brings the total open space to 37%, as well as the elimination of all the required deviations that were initially requested with the first application. So the question from the Planning Commission is this. The applicant is requesting 3 additional units through their cluster development. These 3 extra units would not be achievable with a conventional design. In exchange for these 3 units, the applicant is preserving 37% open space in the site, creating a private park that will be held in perpetuity, using stormwater best management practices, providing additional tree preservation, and lastly, providing a larger perimeter setback than that is required under the R1B underlying zoning district. So in exchange for those benefits, the applicant is seeking approval of 3 additional units that would not be allowed under a conventional layout. If the Planning Commission does find the proposed development meets the standards of the cluster development and does recommend approval to the City Council, we do request that the following 3 conditions be placed upon such approval. The first is that the applicant should provide a detailed narrative that includes the specific methods for tree preservation and protection of natural resources. The second is the applicant should provide or should increase the sidewalk to 8 feet along lake. And thirdly, that the applicant should reconfigure the colonial elevation to reduce the garage door dominance on the front elevation. With that being said, I do want to remind the Planning Commission, the public, that the Planning Commission is a recommending body on this application, and it will go in front of the City Council for final approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions from the Planning Commissioners for Mr. Carlisle?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Krant.
I noticed that some of the letters from residents had concerns about the setbacks from a conventional development to this cluster development. And I did a quick look at the distances from the back of the new proposed homes to their rear property line and the rear yard setback from the existing homes to their property line. And it appears that, to me at least, doing just simple comparisons of the setbacks, that it looks like the cluster homes have a bigger setback, rear yard setback, than the existing homes. Could the staff clarify those distances?
Yes, one of the requirements of the cluster ordinance is that the rear setback, the perimeter setback for all the properties has to equal the rear setback to the adjacent zoning district. So, for example, see if you can, where's my red dot? This site surrounds R1B zoning designation, which requires a 40-foot setback. The applicant is actually, 45-foot setback, I'm sorry. The applicant is actually providing a 60-foot setback, which is located from the edge of the property line to the edge of the front house here. This is a 60-foot in total. In addition, not only do they have this 60-foot setback, they're also providing this open space perimeter buffer, which will not allow the applicant to do any sort of grading or tree removal within this designation except for the bioretention facility. Under traditional conventional R1B zoning, the applicant could pull the property line to this southern edge here and clear cut up to the property lines and remove all this trees. So in addition to an increased setback, they're also preserving open space and trees that would not be saved under conventional subdivision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle? Just one quick question. Can you just clarify, I know you probably mentioned this in our last meeting on this item here, what the applicant is able to build here by right if this were not a cluster development?
By right, the applicant could put 10 conventional lots that meet the R1B underlying zoning designation. How they showed a parallel plan to show those 10 lots. What they showed is basically, as you would normally expect, they show the road, the road bisecting the middle of the site, and they show 10 different lots where the property lines back up to the rear property lines of the adjacent properties. Within that, there is the requirement for tree mitigation, so they would have to preserve some trees or replant what they do take out, but they have the ability to basically clear cut or remove trees all the way up to the property line under a conventional subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
Also, Mr. Chairman, the parallel plan is a by right development, which means they would not have to go to City Council. It would be potentially one meeting of the Planning Commission.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. If there are no other questions from the planning commissioners yes, Ms. Cooper.
So the 2 landmark trees and the 7 woodland trees would, under the by right, be cut down?
They could cut them down, or they could preserve them. If they cut them down, they still have to meet all the requirements for the tree mitigation under the woodland protection ordinance they have now.
Right.
But there is a less likely chance that they would preserve any trees under a conventional than they're able to under this cluster provision. In addition, I do want to note that the other amenities the applicant is offering, such as the park in this location, the bioswales, those were not shown on the parallel plan or the conventional layout plan, so those again would not be part of a conventional subdivision.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions from the commissioners for Mr. Carlisle, then if the applicant is here, the applicant may step forward and please address the remaining issues that were brought before you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commissioners. My name is Mike Powell. I'm the design engineer for the project. I believe Mr. Carlisle and the staff here at the City of Troy has done an excellent job reviewing this plan and representing it before you. The plan, we believe, is a great win-win for not only the community but the surrounding neighborhood. What we've tried to do is minimize the visual impact of this development on any of the adjacent properties. We've maintained a significant buffer of existing trees all the way around the project so that there's no clear cutting. That was what was presented right to the property line. And we have maintained the view from all those homes all the way around the north, west, and south of this particular project. So we've tried to mitigate the impact of this development on the surrounding neighborhood. And then we've also tried to enhance the environmental features as much as we possibly could. As what was presented, all the trees in the area around this particular project are going to be maintained in perpetuity. As part of the narrative that will be presented to the City Council if you approve this, is that we would be placing a protective fence all the way around the tree preservation area, just outside those bioretention areas, to make sure that there are no mistakes from contractors backing into the tree line whatsoever. So our intent is to preserve the natural vegetation as it currently exists. And then the bioswales will be maintained in two different aspects. Certainly, during construction, they have to be maintained because they're going to be an important part of the recharging the groundwater. They're there to take 90% of the stormwater from this particular project and perk it back into the ground the way it does in its natural state. And so that percolation in those bioretention basins have to be maintained during the construction. They have to be cleaned within 24 hours of a rainfall event to take any debris or any silt that has accumulated in them. All the best management practices then have to be maintained during construction. After the construction, then they will be planted with rain garden type vegetation, and they will be maintained on a as needed but no less than a year's schedule to make sure the vegetation is maintained, make sure that any plants that have died have been replaced, and maintain that the grates that are going to be in those to take the water and perk it down to the ground have been cleaned off so that the water is in fact going back into the ground where it does here naturally. So what we've tried to do is minimize the impact on the surrounding neighbors and yet maintain the environmental sensitivity of the existing site the very best we can. And we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for that? Yes, Mr. Hudson?
Sir, who is going to maintain these bioswales on a yearly basis?
During construction or afterwards?
After construction?
There
After
will-
the project is completed?
Yes. There will be a very significant, the landscape architect will be providing a very detailed analysis or method in order to maintain those bioswales as part of the master deed and bylaws of the association. This will have a very strong association.
The association is going to have the responsibility of maintaining that?
They will. They'll probably hire a landscaper to be able to come in and maintain those on an annual basis, however.
Is that part of the bylaws of the condominium?
That would be our recommendation is to make those as part of the bylaws. That is correct.
No. Who's the developer?
The developer is right here.
Will he be
Yes.
doing that as part of the project to provide in the bylaws of that condominium the maintenance and who will do it and on what basis?
That is correct. That'll be part of the master deed and bylaws as just as detailed as cleaning the storm sewer system out if in fact it gets silted over, and maintaining the roads and the landscaping that has to be preserved. If a tree dies, the association then has to go in and actually replace the trees. It'd be about the same scenario.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Quinn?
Question on the fencing you were talking, that is a temporary fence?
That would be a temporary fencing. The intent was to make that always visible from the rear of these structures that are being put in. So it's to prevent accidental intrusion into those natural areas. It's not the intent to prevent people from walking in there after the project is done. The lots themselves stop just short of the bioswales, so they'll know where their property line is, but that doesn't prevent them from walking and hiking through the woods as it currently exists.
So that fence will totally be removed?
It'll be totally removed at the conclusion of the project. That is correct.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Thank you, Commission.
No other questions. So this is not a public hearing, but we will open it up to comments from the public. So if you would like to sign up, if you haven't signed up yet, if you would like to speak to this item, you can please come forward and sign up right there. And we will give you 3 minutes to speak on this item. Are we using the clock tonight?
Yes.
So we're using this timer up here. When the yellow light comes on, that indicates you have 1 minute left to speak, and the red light indicates that 3 minutes is up. And for anybody that wants to speak, you can sign up right now and you can come forward and speak.
I'll be the first, maybe I'll have some followers. Thank you. My name is Toby Goslin.
and I live on Folkestone Drive in the subdivision that will be neighboring this development. I come to you, as I did last time, with some experience. I moved here from White Lake Township, new construction, condominium, Ivanhoe Huntley Builders. And you'll recognize that name because he's been in business until he went out of business. And I see red flags flying in this situation. I love the process. I love the thought of the condominium complex for people that want to downsize from larger homes. I am concerned on a couple of levels. I like what I see on paper. It all looks great. I'm concerned about a developer who's brand new. No experience, not a builder. I know that the architect has a great plan. I am concerned. The thing that scares me the most is I'm looking at the Town Center Drive Amber Apartments, and you'll recognize the picture of this development that is still dark, and there's piles of debris and an incomplete project. I'm not sure what happened. I'm sure that you professionals are aware of what's going on there. I don't know, but it's blight. And I took pictures today because I'm so frustrated watching this every single day as I pass through Troy. It's still raw construction on the inside of this complex. I don't understand what's happening. I hate to see that happen in this development. I'm not sure who's in charge of it, and I'm not sure what the ordinances are. I know that we're, law-abiding citizens, and there are legal expectations. I'm concerned about a small developer. I'm concerned about contractors or lack of contractors or liens on property and things go stale. I'm just concerned about that part of this project. And maybe you have some answers to my questions, but what happens when the development goes south, stops? Are we going to look at a pile of debris? This development was started at the same time Children's Hospital was started, and I came here tonight in the dark, and it's light and vibrant, and everything at Children's Hospital is going on, but this one's not. So maybe you could speak to that, and I guess it all based on ordinances, and the planning department is new to me, and the commission is new to me, but coming out of a condominium, I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I hope that you have some answers to my question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else wishes to speak?
Good evening. I'm Carol Mazurek. I'm at 5172 Hertford. So I'm here tonight to address the concerns that we have regarding the proposed drainage system for the condos. My property directly backs to the land that will be developed for large, my understanding last time was over 3,000 square foot homes. Currently, the plans show that there will be a bioswale system to provide drainage around the perimeter, ending in a detention pond. Many aspects of this system concern me, and I would like you, the Planning Commission, to think about this as well before granting final approval tonight. I'm concerned about the maintenance of this system. As the lots will be sold, will the entire bioswale be created prior to the construction of the first home? And how long before it's functioning at 100%? I learned now tonight as far as maintenance, which I'm very concerned about maintenance being on an as-needed or once yearly basis. So if something breaks down in the spring, do they not, if we're looking at silt or how long it goes, is it a couple months before this is addressed? When the plants are dying, when will they be replanted, and who will be performing the weeding of this area? If there's blockages along the route, will my basement flood due to poor drainage of the property behind me? Also, if the water becomes stagnant here, will this be an area for mosquitoes to breed? Will rats and mice find shelter here if there's overgrowth of the weeds and the plants? And as for creating the bioswale, how long has a company been developing this system? What's their track record? What are their systems still doing in 20 years? Are they still fully functioning effectively? I'm also concerned about the future funds that will be held in reserve for the upkeep. Hearing now tonight that it will be the association. So with the homeowners association, if they start to have homes that are vacant, are they still going to have the money in the future? So I hope that I've raised some pertinent questions for you to think about tonight regarding the drainage before granting the final approval of the current plans presented to you tonight.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Rob Policia. I'm at 5141 Folkestone, which is the lot that's adjoining the northeast corner of this property. I have several concerns. The first is that there are, originally, as was mentioned, 10 houses that are allowed to be built on there. There's 13. With the additional houses, each lot size is going to have to go from the lot sizes surrounding the Sylvan Glen community today, which is a minimum of 100 foot wide, down to about 70 foot wide. In addition to that, the housing, if it's similar to what was proposed last time, is much bigger. Therefore, the amount of space in between these houses is going to be probably less than half of the space that I have between my house and my neighbor's houses today. I currently have a 120-foot lot in the very back. There's 50 feet between my house, the edge of my house, and my neighbor's house. There's a lot of open space there, and that's one of the main reasons I moved to Sylvan Glen, is because it did have larger lots. So I contend that adding 3 more houses in there, it's going to look more congested, more cluttered, and will have a negative impact on the values of our houses in Sylvan Glen. The second thing I'm concerned about is the water drainage. I'm not exactly sure what a bioretention is, but it sounds like there is a possibility for some standing water there. I'm not a big fan of standing water. We have storm drains in Sylvan Glen. The possibility of standing water with plants that are designed to absorb the water sounds to me like you could have some flooding if you have a lot of rain in several days in a row, or if the plants don't hold up or drain the amount of water that they're supposed to. I don't know if the storm drains can handle the existing properties plus 4.5 acres. I don't know if the retention ponds can handle that. I'm hoping that you guys have all gotten into the detail of that and maybe can explain that to us. The third is with regard to green space. It seems to me when we take into account green space, we should also take into account what's on that green space in terms of wildlife. There's deer in this lot today. There's no way there's going to be deer in this lot, regardless of whether there's 10 homes or 13 homes, but that's something that is a consequence to the people around. So in summary, I'm opposed to the cluster option. It's very simple. Where do you have more space, land, open space, with 10 homes or with 13 homes? You clearly have more space with 10 homes. That's what I like about my community. It has nice wide lots. It has lots of open space in between the houses. And I'm very concerned about the water drainage system with these bioretention ponds. So I would urge you to not approve this proposal today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commissioners. My name is Christine Samancic, and I live at 5464 Whitehaven. I moved to Troy with my family, my mom and dad, in 1960. I'm a graduate of Troy High School. Moved out when I got married, and in 1976, my husband and I were looking to build a house. We looked at the Emerald Lake subdivision. We thought the lots were too small. We came over to Sylvan Glen and we fell in love with it. So we bought a lot and we built a house. The next year, they extended to Sylvan Glen 3. And 2 years later, we had our whole street flooded. The whole subdivision, the back end of the subdivision was all flooded because they found out that the storm drains weren't too big enough in the back of the sub there to take care of all the property. I am also worried about the drainage, and I understand what the fellow people here, and I'd like to thank the Planning Commission, and maybe that you haven't had anything to do with this, but on Whitehaven and on Donaldson, all those houses are conforming to Sylvan Glen. Those people didn't sell their lots across from Smith School, but now all the houses there are conforming to keep our sub the way it was, and that's the only thing I'm asking of this subdivision. I don't like the cluster home concept. I didn't move here to see cluster homes near us. And I'm worried about, just like the rest of the residents, I'm worried about the subdivider, and I'm worried about the water problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Mazurek. I live in 5172 Hertford. I'm right behind the new development plan. I had spoke last time, but I'm here again today to talk more about the environmental impact of this decision. I'm happy to hear about how much of an effort is going to be put onto preserving a lot more trees during the construction, but I've seen it, like, especially with friends' houses who live around here too, where builders just, they don't care and they don't respect the nature that's trying to be preserved here. And I also just want to remind how much of an impact this land has for deer especially too. Like, the DNR has said that they're not migratory animals, but because in Troy we're building so much, it's forcing them to move around place to place because there's not as much green space for them to live. They also live in certain areas in the summer versus the winter time, and this is the exact area that they all come to during the winter time to stay. They feed off of some of the fallen apples and a lot of the blackberry bushes that are very lush here, and so if they come back and this is completely gone and there's nowhere for them to go, they're pushed out once again. And I feel that this just, it has a lot of long-lasting ecosystem that has been here for years and years, that we have foxes, coyotes, skunks, rabbits, everybody lives here. So I just hope that there is a real emphasis on trying to preserve as many trees and as much natural space as possible.
Thank you.
I'm Joe Johns. I live at 270 Harwich. Not to reiterate things, but the drainage is a big problem. I have seen projects where it's maintenance companies set it up, turn it over to the homeowners association, and it does become a problem. For the problems have already been mentioned. The biggest thing, another thing is, I assume all the variances were taken care of, because we had some problems with variances at the last meeting, that they weren't meeting up to the standards and the codes. And I agree with Mr. Policia. I said, this is better for, if we need a lot of houses in here, I think the maximum should be 10. And that's about, and make the houses fit the neighborhood. I mean, we have some in the subdivision, like on Trinway, where this huge 3-story house just doesn't fit the neighborhood. And then, so, but other than that, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak on this item?
Hi, my name is Mary Ann Husson. I live on Hertford Drive. This is sort of spontaneous for me to come up here and say a few words. I don't have anything prepared, but living in Sylvan Glen since 1981, it's one of the nicest subs in Troy. The houses were built in the 70s. They are so well maintained. The lots are they're big, their landscape's so nice. There were 3 phases. Sylvan Glen 1, 2, and then 3 was added. How beautiful it is to walk on these wide streets and these beautiful pieces of property. You could walk from Sylvan Glen 1 through 2 through 3. It's a very welcoming and beautiful neighborhood. To me, something like this does not belong. It takes away the integrity of Sylvan Glen. I think a lot of people that do move to Troy, when the houses in our sub do not stay on the market very long because of the large lots. It's not that the houses are so big, but we do get the property. And besides that, I don't think we need any more traffic on Long Lake Road. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did she sign in?
Ma'am, did you sign in? If you haven't signed in, can you please sign in, please?
It was very spontaneous. Well, oh, do anyone have a pen? Oh, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Mary Johns, and my property backs onto the cluster development here at 270 Harwich. And I just want to reiterate, if I had any real say about it, I would say please just only put 6 units on this property. But from what I understand, that's already been overruled and 10 are allowed. So I just want to reiterate that please allow the development to be something that will fit in with the neighborhood and that will give the lot size what we're used to. Thank you.
Thank you. If there is no one else from the audience that wants to speak on this item, I'll bring it back to the table. And does anyone want to address or comment any other questions that were brought up by the audience? I just wanted to bring up a few of the concerns that I heard reiterated. If Mr. Savedant or Mr. Carla can just clarify the drainage concern that some of the residents have reiterated. If you can address that in terms of what the design requires and what the code requires in terms of engineering and drainage remaining on the site.
So this, what the applicant seeks tonight is a recommendation that would go before council ultimately for preliminary site plan approval. Once it gets preliminary site plan approval, it would essentially grant the petitioner the opportunity to put together and then submit final site plan approval. At that time, that would include all the engineering details. So we would engineer this system, these systems. As part of the city review, we would review not only the systems per se, but also the maintenance plan or plans that accompany the systems. There's a requirement that new development cannot adversely affect drainage on neighboring property. So it has to be designed so that it does not impact those properties. So these bioretention areas will be designed by a professional engineer who's sitting here this evening, and to function properly, a bioretention has to be designed properly, constructed properly, maintained properly. Those three things have to happen, and we will require that they do happen. This bioretention is something that the Planning Commission generally supports. It is an alternative to typical stormwater, traditional stormwater. Where's the pointer, Mr. Carlisle? If this was a by right 10-unit parallel plan, what they would do is there'd only be 10 units there. Instead of being 60 feet from the property line, they'd be pushed to 45 feet from the property line. There would be stormwater. There'd be pipes in the front yards, and between each house there'd be a storm drain and a catch basin. Storm drain. Am I correct, Mr. Powell?
That is correct.
Storm drain. I'm not an engineer. Mike is. Catch basin. They'll clear cut all these trees, and to make sure that there's no negative drainage on the surrounding properties, they're going to put catch basins here, and all those trees are coming down. And engineers will also tell you that one of the best things for absorbing water are trees, and that's a great natural way to absorb water. So also another thing that comes to mind here is if there's flooding in these bioretention areas, they're going to impact these homes before they impact the neighbors. So it's in the best interest of the development to maintain these properly as per the bylaws, because they're going to be the first ones impacted. So and believe me, Mr. Chairman, I completely understand the concerns of the neighbors related to maintenance. It is a serious issue, and when this is handed over to the homeowners association, they need to be diligent in their maintenance. 100% correct on the part of the audience that have made comments related to that, and it is important. But the first step is going to be having the engineer design this properly. We're going to review to ensure that it works. Then it's going to have to be maintained properly. Are there any other questions that come to mind, Mr. Chairman?
No, thank you. Mr. Edmonds.
Piggybacking on that same item, has the engineering department reviewed this plan?
Only on a preliminary basis, and they support the preliminary. They have not reviewed engineering drawings because they have not been prepared yet. The engineer is not going to invest, the applicant's not going to invest in significant time and money preparing engineer drawings until the preliminary gets approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Krent.
One of the homeowners in the adjacent area brought up the item of these homes are rather large. He said 2-3-story, very large homes. Actually, I looked at the elevations. You're looking at 1- and 2-story homes, and the square footage on the first floor ranged from 1,742 to about 2,000 square feet. I don't know the exact square footage of the surrounding homes, but I would imagine they fall within that same 1,700, 1,500 to 2,000 square foot. So I don't think these are going to be incompatible with surrounding homes as far as size.
Yes, Mr. Carlisle.
Just to clarify that point that was brought up, the applicant is proposing 3 different elevation types and 3 different floor plan types. They range from a 2,000 square foot ranch up to a 2,500 1.5 story and a 2,500 colonial, which are, I would say, are in range, maybe slightly larger than some of the surrounding homes, but they're certainly not significantly larger than the surrounding properties.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, back on the storm drain capacity, one of the residents mentioned or questioned the storm drain capacity on this site. Just like with any other site, this site is being engineered, and that detention basin, the detention pond, the detention area is being designed to more than adequately have the capacity to hold the drainage and off of this site.
That is correct. At this point, we've only been provided with very rough numbers, preliminary numbers for preliminary site plan review, indicating that this pond is roughly the appropriate size, but the details will be ironed out during engineering.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the planning commissioners or comments, concerns? Mr. Krent.
Another one of the neighbors commented about preserving the natural features of this piece of land. And by having the cluster, you're allowing for a bit deeper setback than the surrounding homes have on the backyard lots, and preserving trees that would normally be cut down if it was just a standard development of 10 homes. So I really like to have natural features preserved, and I think this is a good way to do it. As far as the deer, they roam in my backyard. They roam all over the city, and truthfully, as residents, we don't have any real controls over where the deer roam, and to say, well, let's keep this a haven for deer, it's really the property owned by the developer. You really can't tell them what to do to preserve deer and other animals and fox. So I just want to address that item.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Krant. I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on that. I think just to add a little bit more background on the cluster ordinance. When this cluster ordinance was put together, the intent behind it was to preserve as much green space as possible on a site, and for the developer to be creative and bring creative options in terms of different ideas or the most ideal scenario possible to preserve that green space. And in the case of conventional design and conventional development where only 10 homes would be placed on this site, I think it was already mentioned a few times that the setback, the rear yard setback would basically be reduced down to 45 feet, and that would almost guarantee complete clear cut of the perimeter trees and replanted based on the tree preservation ordinance to meet that ordinance, but it wouldn't guarantee any kind of preservation as presented tonight. That definitely would not be there. The tree ordinance preservation would be implemented, but what we see here tonight in terms of green space would be a totally different scenario. So this development, in terms of being proposed as a cluster, the intent is to preserve green space. The applicant has shown increase of green space from around 30% last time with the initial design to 37% by eliminating one of the units. So the green space has only increased. Another item that was brought up by one of the residents is the concern of homes being so closer together in this development that's being proposed versus the existing homes. And again, that development is not the same as this. This is a cluster development, and the parameters and the setbacks are significantly different because the requirements are different in terms of cluster and standard ordinance. So I just wanted to, again, clarify that in terms of how much green space is being preserved versus just your standard clear-cut development with only 10 homes on it. Ms. Koopa?
I know this is not related, but if we could remember at the end of our meeting to discuss the Amber, because is there any relationship between Amber and this developer that would make us think that this would take forever to build?
I think they're two different types of projects. I completely understand the concern of the one resident who spoke about Amber. I drive by it every day and I cringe every day as well. I mean, bad habit. Little Caesars Arena started construction after Amber, and the Wings are playing there this week. I mean, and that's a significantly larger project, so I get the frustration. This is a little bit different because instead of one building on one property, once this is, assuming this moves forward, whether it's as a parallel plan or a cluster, they'll get their final approval. They'll put in the underground utilities including the bioretention or traditional. Then they'll put the road in. Once they do the utilities in the road, they can start selling units. Lots in this area go for, well, the audience knows as well as I do, anywhere from 100 to 150 to 180,000 a lot. I know that there would be developers lined up to purchase this property in its entirety or lot by lot. I think the applicant would tell you that he's probably been approached by a couple of developers since the last meeting to buy it. I mean, this is not going to sit there undeveloped for very long. This is the same reason that this is attractive for new homeowners is the same reason that all these people are in the audience this evening concerned about this development. They live in a great neighborhood. They want this to be a great neighborhood. So I think the challenges with this site are different than Amber. Again, numerous units that they can sell. He could sell piecemeal he could sell one unit. He could sell all the units. This is such an attractive place to live that this will not be, I believe, undeveloped for very long.
Thank you. Mr. Edmonds.
Yes, may we ask the developer or the owner of the property to give us an estimate of how long you believe this project will be in construction and when will the project be completed? You heard the question about how long, you're a new developer.
Correct. Well, I have been in the home improvement business for about 20 years. This is the first size project like this I'm taking on. My estimate would be anywhere between a year and a half to final full completion. If I had to guess, I mean, I'm not 100% sure on that, but
thank you.
I'm doing as quick as I possibly can, so as quick as they sell.
Well, you heard your neighbors.
I did, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we have no more other questions or comments from the planning commissioners, I think we're ready for a resolution on this. Anybody would like to make a motion on the resolution?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question on the resolution. It references 3 conditions. So have we dealt with all 3? I know we talked about condition number 1. So is that resolved?
Condition number 2, sidewalk being increased to 8 feet in length. Is that something that wasn't mentioned by the applicant tonight?
It's actually an engineering requirement that major roads have 8-foot sidewalks, so it's a requirement of engineering standards.
And the third, which we didn't touch on, the garage.
Garage dominance of colonial elevation.
Yeah, I can speak to that real briefly. One of the requirements of the cluster is that the garage does not be the dominant feature of the front elevation. The colonial is they're proposing a 3-car garage on the front. With a 3-car garage, it's hard not to be the dominant feature of the front elevation, especially with a 2,000 square foot, 2,500 square foot home. So what we were asking the applicant to do is come back with a revised elevation for the colonial that's not a 3-car front-loaded garage. If he wants to do a 3-car garage, he can do a side-loaded, or he can come back with a 2-car garage, or come back with a 3-car elevation that's a little bit more softer on that front facade. That's what we're asking.
Okay. Then the resolution will stand with the 3 items included. I guess we'll just read it as that. Mr. Edmonds?
Preliminary site plan review, file number SP, I guess I should just move to the resolution. Resolution resolved that the Planning Commission recommends to City Council that preliminary site condominium approval pursuant to Article 8 and Section 10.04 of the zoning ordinance as requested for Davis Cluster Development Site Condominium. 13 units, thank you. Lots north side of Long Lake, east of Livernois, Section 10, currently zoned R1B, one family residential district, be granted subject to the following. Number 1, provide detailed narrative that indicates a specific method for protecting significant natural features and bioswale maintenance. Number 2, increase width of sidewalk on Long Lake to 8 feet. And number 3, reduce garage dominance of colonial elevation.
And second by Mr. Faison. We got a motion by Mr. Edmonds and a second by Mr. Faison. Roll call, Ms. Sarnicki, please.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian, excuse
Yes.
me. Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Motion passes and it goes to the Troy City Council.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We don't have a date selected yet for when this would go before City Council. We typically move fairly quickly. There's typically the next available meeting, there's an announcement of the public hearing, and then the meeting after that, there's a public hearing. So stay tuned, and it will be a public hearing. If you have questions about this application, please contact the planning department.
Thank you. We move on to item number 6 on the agenda tonight. Preliminary site plan review, file number SPJPLN 2017-0013/0014, proposed Yard House Restaurant and Season 52 Restaurant, northeast corner of Big Beaver and Crooks, 950 and 1000 West Big Beaver, Section 21, currently Zone BB, Big Beaver District. Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you. We all should be very familiar with this site. The applicant tonight is seeking approval in relation to, in consistency with the concept plan to develop the 2 outlot restaurants that are located on Crooks Road. The proposed outlot restaurants is a Yard House and a Season 52. These are 2 of the 6 outlot pads that the Planning Commission approved as part of the original concept approval back in February of 2017. At that time, the concept plan was submitted, was approved in concept, and then each individual pad had to come in for Planning Commission approval for moving forward. Just for orientation, these are the only 2 pads that front on Crooks Road. The Seasons 52 is actually fronting on Crooks Road. The Yard House is adjacent to 52, and again in between the Seasons 52 and the tower, existing tower building. The location of the 2 restaurants is located in the interior parking lot and the parking has been compensated with the addition of that 8-story parking structure that the Planning Commission recently approved. We have some very minor comments in regards to issues of landscaping, trash screening, in photometrics, and the primary focus of our concerns, our discussion tonight is really on the architecture. So just to take the minor issues of the landscaping, the trash, and the lighting, we do want to note that the landscaping in the streetscape that was shown is not consistent with the concept plan that was approved back in February. So we do ask for consistency with regards to that. Specifically, the streetscape along Crooks is not consistent, and the landscaping that's shown in the southern end of the parking lot in those parking canoes, for lack of a better term, is not consistent with what was approved as part of the concept plan. In regards to trash screening, they are proposing a trash enclosure location. You can see it. It's just north. Where's my red dot? There's my red dot. It's just north of the proposed buildings. They're going to have internal trash rooms and then cart the trash out to the trash enclosure just north on the northern property line. The applicant did not provide any screening details about how they're going to screen that trash enclosure and how it relates to the architecture of the buildings. And thirdly, the applicant did provide a photometric plan, but the photometric plan did not account for the parking lot lighting, so we can't confirm that the lighting levels on this site are consistent with what the ordinance requires. Those are fairly minor issues that we can deal with, but we did want to raise that to the attention of the Planning Commission. Specifically for tonight's meeting, though, we would like to discuss and focus really on the elevations and the architecture being proposed for both the Seasons 52 and the Yard House. In regards to the Seasons 52, again, that's the building that fronts directly on Crooks Road. The applicant is proposing a stone veneer with a mix of EIFS and a glass and accented by an aluminum trellis system. The EIFS, which appears to be a very dominant feature of the elevation and material use, the applicant did not, at least it's hard to tell from the elevations how that's treated, if that's just a flat EIFS or there's any detail in regards to that elevation. We do also note that the primary building is oriented to the south end parking lot, and that's where the only entrance to the building is located. And again, there is a requirement in the form-based districts that the entrance has to front on the Crooks Road elevation itself. Secondly, it's not clear from the elevations if they meet the transparency requirement of both along the Crooks Road elevation and the northern elevation that fronts additional parking area. As in regards to the Yard House, again, the applicant proposes a mix of metal paneling, EIFS, and glass. Similar issue that we raised with the Seasons 52. It's not clear from the elevation how that EIFS is treated. And it appears that the applicant does not meet...
Sir, we can't close the door.
Can't close the door, sir.
This is a public meeting. You can't close the door. Please open the door.
Can't close the door. Please, the door's open. It's a public meeting. Sir,
Please open the door.
open the door.
Thank you.
Sorry. No, thank you. So similar concept for Yard House. We'd like some more information from the architect in terms of how the EIFS is treated for the elevation. We have asked the applicant to answer specific design questions that was raised by the Planning Commission at previous meetings in regards to treatment along Big Beaver. Those questions were emailed to the architect in advance of the meeting, and those questions are included in your packet, so we do encourage a discussion with the applicant in regards to how they're able to answer those design questions. So, in summary, we do support the outlet development. The site layout itself is consistent with the concept plan approved. However, we do feel that there should be a more robust discussion in regards to the building elevations and design prior to any Planning Commission approval of the preliminary site plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Carlisle? Mr. Edmonds.
Well, at least for Mr. Carlisle, what percentage of the surface, outside exterior surface area is EIFS?
Mr. Salvador, can you pull the color?
Point out the EIFS material.
So the EIFS, from my understanding, is the EIFS is this, I believe my red, is this orangish tannish color. This is the stone veneer, glass, and then aluminum trellis I was speaking about. This is also EFIS paneling, to my understanding. So all the tan colors that don't appear to be stone, that's the EFIS. This is the elevation that fronts on Crooks. This is the elevation. This is the primary elevation that fronts on the southern parking lot where their main entrance is this location here. This is the corner that fronts on Crooks.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Faison.
I was on the site yesterday. Well, here's my question. When will the parking deck be completed? And will it be completed before these restaurants are open?
I don't know a completion date. I know that an issue of certificates of occupancy will require that the deck is functional to accommodate parking prior to this being, they will probably start construction on this prior to the deck being finished, but my understanding is the building department won't issue certificates of occupancy to actually use the building until the deck is functional.
Because I was on the site, I went at the Shake Shack, and I was on the site today too, and it looks like they have it cordoned off where they're going to build the restaurants. Is that right? So it's very tight when you go there now. Yeah.
I know they've got the deck's under construction, as you saw.
Yep.
And they've got a very aggressive construction schedule. They recognize that timing is everything.
Okay.
And I forget what their anticipated date of completion of the deck was, but I remember when I heard it, I went, whoa, that's really aggressive.
Okay.
Yeah.
When we had discussion about the concept plan, the Shake Shack and Fidelity have kind of been moving along in the system, and so the Planning Commission and city staff was very clear that any future development, the apartment buildings, these two developed restaurants, they had to be done post the deck being functional and operable, so that the parking is sufficient on the site.
Thank you.
What you didn't say, but I think what you were alluding to was not only are we the cordoning off of the space is lost parking, and then compounding that with two new restaurants with more visitors to the site.
Just making a comment on the architecture of these two new restaurants. So the architects are different than Shake Shack and Fidelity. Obviously, the architecture is significantly different than what we've already seen and what was already built there.
So the concept plan was being led by Jason Krieger of Krieger Clad Architects out of Royal Oak. He was kind of the overseer for the architectural program for the concept plan, the apartment buildings, the deck, and the Fidelity. Shake Shack had their own architect that came in, but we had required that there was consistency with the Fidelity building with the Shake Shack in terms of material and design as much as possible. There's also consistency with the apartment building and consistency with the deck and the retail buildings that front on the deck with the Fidelity and the Shake Shack. This is two separate architects that from my understanding, they may have had coordination with Mr. Krieger. I don't know if they have or not. But as far as we know, these are two independent architects, independent elevations.
Okay. Any other questions? I guess if the applicant is here this evening, would like to speak to the questions, issues that were raised tonight.
And Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, so there were actually two separate applications, one for Seasons 52, one for your house. So we took them in as separate applications. However, you see from the drawings, it's the same site plan. So we felt that in order to be more efficient and effective reviewing this, we treat it as one application. So two different restaurants, two different architects, but the same application.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Right. First, I apologize about the door. I didn't realize. I just thought I just couldn't hear. So.
I should have gone over there to tell them to be quiet.
And you were more effective than I was because they didn't listen to me.
Well, my name is James Powell. I'm a site development manager for Darden Restaurants. We actually own both of these restaurants. They're both our concepts. Fairly popular. Seasons 52 is an internally developed concept that Darden came up with, and then Yard House is a concept we acquired out of California, and as we're growing and is very popular as well. And but we do use different architects for all of our concepts, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Eddie V's and Olive Garden. We own those restaurants as well as a few others. We're excited to come into Troy. It's pretty nice dynamic as far as dining. So we're just here to answer any questions. I've got my civil engineer here for both the dual pad site. I've got the architect for Yard House, and then I can field any questions for Seasons 52.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Tagle.
Well, I'd like to hear, we've taken measures to try to better understand how design concepts are developed and how they best fit in our community and in locations in our community. So we've posed several questions. I'd love to hear the response from the architect as to those questions, and if the architect is for which project? Who's here?
Yard House is here.
Yard House.
And I'm for the Seasons 52.
Okay. So that personally, I'd like to hear, kind of how do you, how are these concepts developed and how do they best fit in Troy and why do they best fit here?
Right. Well, Seasons 52, again, it was internally developed, and it was kind of a unique concept because they actually, they play on the word Seasons 52 because every season they change the menu, and then every week they have specials within that menu, and a lot of times they're from locally available produce and that kind of thing. There's a limit on the calories that each entree has, and it used to be 500 calories, and they've expanded the menu a little bit to go up to a little higher. And another one of their kind of claims to fame is the wine bar. They have an excellent wine selection. So we have a very, very good dynamic in the bar and patio area. And then we also have private dining rooms for functions, as well as the public dining areas. The private dining rooms are opened up to public dining when there's not a private function. So it kind of gives us some flexibility, and it's kind of unique way they have all that oriented. And very few of these are the same building. We're not just coming in with the cookie cutter or prototype. They're the general look and the design of the exteriors contemporary. It's we actually have a sample of the stone, and we had the boards are being passed around so you can see what the eave is. It's kind of a sand finish. It's not a real heavy texture on the ephes, but it's a contemporary design, and it ties well into the inside, which is a lot of rich kind of woods and some more contemporary design in there as well. So I think it's unique, a unique look. It's not like a lot of others that you see, and it's done very well for us in that concept.
Well, I appreciate your explanation, and it's unfortunate the architect's not here to speak to some of this because the menu and the wine list and the private dining, that's all great.
Right.
But we're really talking about the architecture of the building and how did the architect, you said these aren't cookie cutters, so this was designed specifically for this site and this community. And we're curious to understand, okay, you're showing us a building. Why does it look like it looks?
Correct.
Honestly, now my computer screen, I understand colors aren't true, and I'm going to see them in just a minute. But the architect is out of Florida. Right. This looks like it'd fit great down in Florida just with the colors. Mm-hmm. It has that Florida look to it, that peachy look. So I would be curious, how did they arrive at this color? Why this color here? And again, I appreciate your role in the project, and I understand that you may not be able to really address some of these questions because that's not your expertise in this project. So,
well, I am an architect, a registered architect, but I'm not the concept architect. I'm not the brand design manager.
They basically said, here's the building, make sure it gets built.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But, I mean, this concept's been evolved over the years, and it's somewhat consistent with other designs we do or the other locations, but like I say, none of them are the same. Very few of them are the same building from place to place. Each one of them are designed for the site. In this case, we wanted to take advantage of the patio fronting on Crooks, so you could see, because it's a dynamic patio in the.
Sir, could you raise your voice? I cannot barely hear you. Could you raise your voice? I can barely hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. The patio was designed to be on Crooks Lane so it could be seen. It's a dynamic patio when the weather's nice, and when the doors, there's some open doors that actually open, and you can see into the space, and it's very inviting, and makes you want to come into the space. So.
Can you speak a little bit to the large amount of EFS on the building? Because this commission has had many discussions about EFS. It's a very cost-effective material. But if we're talking about an upscale restaurant in an upscale community, the obvious question is why the EFS?
Right. Well, it's, it is cost-effective, but I think we increased at the stone too. We've also increased the stone from the first go around or the first ituration. So we're certainly not trying to, cheap out, for lack of a better term. We're looking for a balance between the stone and the colors on the EFS. And certainly we're not, just putting one color of EFS and making it just a monotone scheme. So, but I believe we have increased the amount of stone to try to address some of those comments, and it sounds like maybe we need to do some more on it. I don't know if there's a percentage you're looking for, or if there's a requirement for stone versus EFS, or you're trying to limit the amount, but that would be helpful if we knew that.
Mr. Quinn?
I'm looking at the north elevation, and it looks to me close to 80% EFS. And it looks like the back of a building. It doesn't look, and don't forget, this is, the parking and the approach to this building is from all four sides.
Right.
So it's just overwhelming to me. There's so much of that monotone look that facade should be better designed.
Noted. Right, okay.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
So the Planning Commission's very concerned about design, and what they did, they wanted to come up with a way to engage designers and provide an opportunity for designers to present their projects in a way that was, they addressed some of the things that the Planning Commission was interested in. So what we did in coordination with the Planning Commission is we came up with a series of questions to kind of provide the architect ahead of time so the architect could come prepared and make a brief presentation. So we prepared those questions. We provided them to Mr. DeGagne, I don't know, 2 weeks ago maybe. They're also included in a report. I was wondering if you had an opportunity to review those questions. Were you provided those questions? Were you aware of our desire to have a presentation based on those questions?
I know it was short notice for me to come up here, and for everybody. Jack DeGagne actually had another Planning Commission meeting. I believe we found out last week that we were on this agenda. So, to answer your question, no, we haven't had a chance to respond to those or to call and ask any questions. But we did want to come and be here and hear comments from the commission. So
thank you.
Okay. So it sounds like some of the concerns being raised here are overlapping with some of the questions that were also mentioned that haven't been addressed, right?
Yeah. So we had sent these 7 questions to our contact from Darden, Mr. DeGagne, and we thought we'd advise him to send these on to have the architect be able to address these. So these are the 7 questions that the Planning Commission, in collaboration with us, have come up with to assist them understand, as well as the designer, kind of walk us through the process coming up with design. So I would suggest if this does get tabled tonight, that you come back or your architect comes back and be able to respond directly to these 7 questions that were emailed to you in regards to design concept.
You know, our architect from the Yard House is here, and I think she's prepared to speak, but I can certainly go back and try to address and work with the CESA 52 as well.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Trish Ernhoff. I'm an architect for the Yard House. And yes, I did get your questions 3-4 days ago. But can you, yeah. The Yard House it renders really dark. It actually isn't. That's why the material board I brought, it is grays. But it is designed to be four-sided architecture. It is designed to be a sophisticated industrial vibe to it. We have 140 taps inside. It's stainless inside. So the outside is supposed to draw you in. It's supposed to be sleek, straight lines, and it's supposed to bring you in to give you the feeling of what's inside. At night, the back cage is lit up in a blue little hue. The outside of the building, it has a white lighter on the other side of it. Do you have a pointer?
I do. It's right here. The top is the pointer.
So we've designed this building for any side that you come up to, you're going to be walking around the building because you want to see what the next side it reveals. So this blue hue is on the front tower, on both sides, and then on the back opposite corner on this cage right here. This light will take you around the corner to the other side, which is that side. So it engages you. This material up here is a black coping. And then we've got a faux louver system, which is this system, and it's black. This is also on the dumpster gates, but it's silver. The dumpster you had a question with, it's a CMU dumpster with thick reveal lines in it, and it's painted gray. So it's a gray CMU coursing. Something to tie the two buildings together and not stick out in the middle of the parking lot. EIFS, we do have EIFS. It's not our main focal. Tile is on every tower and on the patios. So between the tile and the black metal, that is the two main components of the building, and the backdrop is EIFS. So this tower's tile, this tower's tile, this bottom is tile, and then back here is EIFS. And this is EIFS back here. This is tile, and then this is EIFS. From the renderings of the site, can you go to the last few pages of the site?
The 3D renderings?
Yes, please. Okay, so the only thing different in here is per our building department comments, I needed a second egress out of the mezzanine, so you will see an industrial stair in between these two buildings, which gives you a little bit fun play. We put our Yard House kegmen that walk up the stairs, and they are highlighted on that side.
So you have to walk up a stair to get into the building?
No, it's our egress stair only. We just gave it some play, so it just wasn't a ugly stair on the side of the building. The blue brick, which you don't see on any renderings, we have two seasonal patios. When the garage doors roll up, you will see this blue brick on the inside. So each side has some texture to it in different elevations. To answer your questions, describe the context of the site and how the project responds to the character of the area. I think the two buildings actually fit in very well together. They both have tower elements. They're both very linear and sleek. It gives a really nice vibe going down Beaver. You see the Shake Shack that's linear, and you kind of go straight into these buildings. The color palette, the gray fits in. Season 52, yes, it does look like a Florida building, but it's a good contrast for these two projects. If you look at both of these projects together, the same site plan, if you would turn the Season 52 building so you face Crooks, I think it would get lost. Having the two face Beaver, I think gives you a good complementary style. to walk up to both buildings and go, do I want beer or do I want seafood? We also share valet, so it helps that both of the entrances are together. The inspiration and design theme for the concept, we have a sophisticated industrial vibe. That is the design premise for the Yard House. How the project achieves the design concept, it's four-sided architecture. So every side you're going to get a different view and a different feel. Describe the development program and intended uses. It is a restaurant that serves a lot of beer. Has excellent food. Describe the building materials, enhance the design concept. I think I've went over this. I really like the building. I hope you guys do. The important element features, we did discuss the transparency. You guys have an issue with what the concept is. We're trying to use for the back elevation. The screening is on our coolers, and we are using that as our design feature to break up that back facade. So you have the keg tower cage, you've got our sprinkler room, and then you've got a row of this material that breaks up the facade. So that is what we're using on that back elevation for our transparency feature.
Thank you. Any questions for the architect? Yes, Mr. Edmonds.
In your professional opinion, what percentage of the materials on the exterior of the building are EIFS?
I would say
sure
40%.
How many?
40% on the back two sides and the two sides with the patios, maybe 20%. Because most of the EIFS on the two sides facing the complexes, all the EIFS is underneath faux louvers. So this will be on top of it.
And so you designed this building specifically for this Troy location? No,
Yes.
No other Yard House looks like this?
The parts and components are the same, but it is not the same layout.
I'm talking about the exterior. I'm concerned about the look on the exterior.
We have a cage at every new location that is opposite of our entrance tower. So that is consistent.
What is a cage?
This back stair tower right here. It is a metal open, and you can just see our stairs. It hides the back area that isn't very pretty and adds an architectural feature to it.
So the elements are consistent with other locations, but the actual layout and the actual details of each elevation is unique to this site?
Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Tagle.
Did you have an opportunity when you guys were coming up conceptually with the layout of these to talk to the Season 52 architects and really how do these two buildings work together? And really what I'm getting at is you've got a kind of an interior plaza or walkway between these two buildings, but I see nothing in there that's other than it's a nice walk through a lot of landscaping. I don't see anything that where there's some benches or maybe even an outdoor patio that may really create some community between those two buildings and a little more interest.
No, we did not want the community to overlap between the two because it is two different dining environments. So if we had two patios open together, you would have a more of a bar scale versus finer dining. So the interaction between the two, it was not wanted.
Yes, Mr.
I'm a little bit confused on the labeling of these drawings. I'm looking at the...
Yes, I noticed the elevations are labeled incorrectly.
Thank you. So is what's labeled as north elevation, that is the north?
So this is your front elevation, which is Beaver Road.
Correct.
Yep.
And
so that would be the opposite.
That's north. That is really the north.
That is
but
really.
It's different on the drawings. Okay.
Yes, I noticed that when I was going through the packet.
So my comment is, again, very similar to the Seasons 52, is the north elevation is mostly EIFS. Now, it's not as much as the Seasons 52, granted. It does have that really nice glass area with that tower, but the rest looks like the back of a building again. It doesn't, you know, I know your goal was to make it a four-sided building, but this somehow, the other sides look great. They look like a four-sided building. This one just it looks like an empty billboard. It's just too flat. There are some restaurants that I've seen that they put maybe something sculptural on that side and light it beautifully. Something to make that less look like the back of a building.
Okay. Now, that is not a flat plane.
Okay.
So, where is it? So this steps out 15 foot from this
that.
back face.
Okay.
So this steps out, and then this is our seasonal patio that steps in.
Okay.
So that's a fire element.
Yeah, those are fine. Both sides look great to me, but it's that large blank billboard, it needs something.
Okay.
Isn't the north side actually the side that has the main access, what's being proposed, right? So that'll be the new access point to the parking lot for these two. So that's actually the north side.
It'll face the drive, that.
Right. So that'll
It's not technically a street, so it doesn't have the same transparency requirements as it does on Crooks and Big Beaver.
But that will be the main access point off of Crooks that today doesn't exist for basically
Correct.
the parking lot for these two restaurants, okay?
Yes.
So the main entrances to the buildings, both buildings, are on the south side, is that correct?
Correct. Facing Big Beaver.
Facing Big Beaver, but a long ways from Big Beaver. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for the architect at this time? Okay. I guess just in trying to give the architects for both of the buildings feedback in relation to the quantity of EFS, the square footage of EFS, it seems like Seasons 52 has significantly more EFS just intentionally based on what they wanted the look to be. And Mr. Tagle, you commented on that. Do you have any other feedback on the quantity of EFS for this Yard House restaurant that's being proposed?
Well, I guess what I want to say is that, a lot of the massing can minimize the appearance or the heaviness, if you will, of the EFS. So, and I don't know if there's something you can do with the massing, because I understand the whole idea of EFS. It's a cost-effective material. And, but I think, too, we don't want it to be overpowering in the sense of large areas without any
breakup.
Well, breakup or even some type of finer detailing of it,
I have no problem enhancing the reveals to bring lines through it. All that can be developed. That, I agree. A blank wall is not something that you want to see.
Right. And I guess, too, I think, and I appreciate your presentation, it was more of what I was expecting, but I almost look at this as architects, consider this a design charrette, and that you're up here selling us your design or the design that you're presenting, and how did you arrive at that, and you want to get us excited about it. So the more you can do that, and considering a lot of us up here are lay people and don't speak architect speak, so, but I appreciate your presentation tonight, and I guess I'd like that message to go back to the architect for Season 52.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I can't speak for Seasons 52.
Well, maybe through the gentleman sitting behind you that I can't see.
I said, I'm sorry, I can't speak for Seasons 52.
Oh, right, yeah. No, listen, I understand what you're talking about, and I think we can bring some more articulation and fenestration and more stone, reduce the EFS.
Okay.
So definitely work on that. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Edmonds?
Does Seasons 52 only do this tan color? Is that your cookie cutter?
Well, that is just kind of like Yard House is, the same elements, but it's a different layout. I mean, this building was designed specifically for this site. It's not a standard layout. So, but the colors and materials and components, like Yard House, are the same. So, we would probably have to go back to the brand president and to talk about different colors.
I just wish there, personally, I just wish there were a lot more natural stone being used in the surface exterior of the Seasons 52 building.
All right. Well, yeah, I can certainly, and we can certainly take a look at that, and I think increase that without too much trouble.
And I say that even though I'm not an architect, but I noticed the sample that you sent around. The EVIS material had already been delaminated.
Right. Well, yeah. That's transportation.
Well, I hope it doesn't do that on the building itself.
And, you know, we can also look at the courtyard in between the two. Of course, you know, Trish spoke to the fact that we have very different patios, very different dynamics out there. You know, Yard House plays classic rock and roll, and it's more of a jazz type atmosphere in Seasons 52. So we tried to, you know, separate those so they're not competing. But we can certainly look at what's going on in there and put some benches, seating areas, you know, for people that are either waiting for friends or family, or either before or after. We'll be glad to look at that.
Well, and for me, that helps, because I didn't understand the difference in the two restaurants as far as the clientele and the, so that helps. So I understand now why the architecture does what it, or the planning has done what it did.
Right.
So
But we still, and also the valet portion of it and the drop-off, where that's why we both have them fronting there. So the towers are distinctive and give you a sense of entry, but we can still work with a shared valet without, you know, it competing too much.
So you probably won't have speakers from both restaurants in that courtyard, right? Probably just wait.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, we probably have to talk to the brand presidents about that.
Mr. Edmonds.
Yeah. I know at my age and physical conditions, I'm mobily challenged. And if you put a bench, if I've got to walk along between those two buildings, you put a bench there, you know, I'm really happy about that.
Okay.
Just some place to sit down for a few seconds and catch your breath. The other thing, there's no public art here at all. Do you ever consider public art?
Well, we will now. No, I think that's a good point, and it might enhance that space a little bit and make it more usable, a little more user-friendly, whichever way you're coming in.
Mr. Evans.
If Mr. Sanzica were here, he would ask us to talk to the civil engineer, I believe he. So we should maybe, are you the civil engineer?
Yeah.
Tell us about the stormwater retention.
Okay.
That's what Phil would say.
Okay. So my name is Cameron Horvath. I'm with Boss Engineering, representing kind of the more of the site-related aspects to the project. I guess for your benefit, stormwater for the site is relatively minor compared to the overall site, which is much larger, obviously. But really, there's not a whole lot that occurs on a site this small. So we have placed yard drains, which aren't your metal ones. They're typically plastic, a lot smaller, PVC storm pipe all underground, and it will tie into the larger storm system being provided by the landlord, which then goes, I'm assuming, to either an underground detention, retention, or an open air pond somewhere. But I guess for the sake of working on the project together, I know you guys have a lot of concerns about the architecture, and just for clarity moving forward, I mean, we could redesign this thing 100 times and still maybe not satisfy you. So I guess I would just ask if there's any recommendations. I know ultimately it's on the design professional to come up with something that's creative and fits in and all that, but I've seen it before where, you know, we've worked on a project and, you know, sometimes if we don't come out of it with a clear understanding, we're back here 3, 4, 5 times trying to get things right. So I guess I would just ask that if you guys have anything specific that you might like to see, like the bench or more glass on the back or something, I guess I would just ask if you could maybe put those recommendations forward now so we have something to go back to the drawing board with, so we're not just, well, maybe they'd like a line of brick, and then we come back with a line of brick and it's, well, we necessarily don't want that either. Or if there's an opportunity to have maybe like a conference staff call where maybe a few members of the planning commission and the architects can sit down and try to hash something out collaboratively that they think would be, people would respond to better. I guess I would just ask that if you have any recommendations, if you could pass them along. But if you have any other questions about the site, I'm here to answer those if you guys have any.
I'll address this concern.
Yes.
Both buildings on the north side are very bland. So on the yard house, since it's basically a metal / grayish / maybe something, some stainless steel, I don't know, again, I don't know yard house and all their stuff. But some kind of stainless steel bas relief that comes off the building is beautifully lighted with some maybe LED lighting that maybe gradually changes from blues to purples to something, just to make it like, oh, there's something attractive. My eye caught that building. Maybe I should go visit that building. Make it not Disney World, but just an elegant way to show that you've got some art, some class.
The Cruz and Buers had that very same thing on the side of the building.
Yes.
So if you see on the stairs, on what it says, the east elevation, there are little blue lit stainless steel pavement. With those.
Yeah, that's.
Walking.
Well, I would see something more dramatic on the north side. Again, that bland, empty space. I think you've done a great job on those other 3 elevations. It's just that empty space.
Well, I'm just saying, because I can move those guys.
What ones?
The
Because
lights.
they're 8-foot
The lights.
statues.
Oh, statues,
They're
okay.
actually keg, they're
Oh,
outlined
okay,
and then
all right.
holding half kegs. And then blue hue on the keg, and then they're underlit.
Well, yeah, again, I'll leave it up to you as far as
You said
creativity.
stainless and art, and I was like, well, I have those in the building.
Yeah, but something, you've got that 3/4 of empty space look, something there that becomes a piece of art. I can't really see that there.
Yeah, you can kind of see it better in this reading.
Yeah, and that's fine. Well, there's nothing on that north side, it just looks empty. And the same thing with the Seasons 52.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of empty space, and it is a 4-sided building, and we're trying to help your business look great from all sides.
Yep.
And I'm just pointing out, that's the one area, the north side of both buildings look a little empty.
Okay. And I'm not the architect. I don't want to overstep my bounds, but just for clarity's sake, so we can kind of be on the same page, and I know he mentioned there's certain brand things that probably have to go through corporate to get figured out, but I just, it's our goal to try to get through here as quick as possible and appease everyone, so I just didn't want to.
No, that's fine. I'm glad you brought it up. That's fine.
Sure. I think some of the items that were mentioned by Mr. Carlisle that were sent to the architect for Seasons 52 that had not been addressed yet in detail. I think that's a good starting point to address those.
For sure.
And some of the items that were brought up tonight regarding the EFS and the amount of EFS and the color palette and the compatibility between the 2 buildings, understanding that they're completely different feels and vibes and a target customer. But I think I'm guessing maybe we've given you some good feedback to.
No, that's just good.
Go back to the drawing board and continue. Thank you.
I just have a question about the colors.
Sure.
You mentioned the colors. Is it the earth tones? Or is it,
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Is it the earth tones, or is it just too far one way, or can you give me, I guess, some feedback?
I can give a little feedback on it if you don't mind. The stone that you use is a nice natural-looking stone. The color, yes, thank you. It's the color of the ephes looks too sweet. It looks like a Mary Jane candy compared, I'm just trying to let you know, it looks too sweet compared to that more elegant color palette. Again, go more toward that, a variation of that, not the exact same color, because that's not what we want, but it's, maybe a darker version of that or a lighter version of that.
Right.
Stay in that same set of color tones.
Right, and do you like something, we can reduce, if we can reduce the amount of EFS, do you want something with what is left? If we are still have EFS, do you want something with more of a heavy texture than what we were showing on this, or?
I've looked at a lot of EFS. The texture is it's pretty minimal on that scale. You're building so big that it's not going to really have that big of an impact as far as the different textures you can put on EFS. But like I say, that is to me not as sweet a color. It's not that candy look. And I think your colors, that sandy, warm, super warm look compared to those are too, they just don't, it looks like you put a red sock on and a blue sock on today. It just doesn't, they just don't work well together.
Right. So maybe the earth tone, we could still stay in the earth tone palette, but maybe these are muted or toned down a little bit. Yeah. Okay. All right. That helps. That helps. But thank you all very much.
Sure.
I have one more comment. I think one of the things that will really help is the graphic presentation. Because these elevations are dark, they're hard to read, and I think now the 3D perspectives were good, but we only saw a couple of the sides of those. So I think getting the information to us in an understandable way would be important.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Just not to piggyback on, but I guess I'll piggyback on. We specifically referenced the two north elevations. We had concerns about the amount and the application of EFS on the west side elevation of Seasons 52. Crooks Road. The Crooks Road side. It was brought up earlier, but I just wanted to clarify for this discussion that was one of the elevations that needed a little bit more work. We talked about that earlier. I just wanted to be clear.
Sure. Gotcha. Understood.
Yes, a question for staff.
Right, yes.
One of the items of the 7 that you called out was incorporate streetscape program from Big Beaver. What can you just kind of give us I know what we.
Yeah, the Fidelity and the Shake Shack have a very proscribed and consistent streetscape pattern, which includes the use of pedestrian lighting, benches, planters, etc. And the idea was to carry that concept and theme around the corner and wrap in front of the Seasons 52 site as well.
Thank you.
So it's as part of the concept plan, which we can give you all that information. That same concept was supposed to continue on to front on Crooks, so there's consistency between the two elevations.
And I think why that's important is in the southeast section of the property, Unicorp, the owner, has gone to great lengths to kind of unify some of these different buildings and uses together through street furniture and bricks and brick paving and bike racks and things like that. And I think that we want to be consistent, but also there's going to be a lot of pedestrians that are flowing through this development. We've got 2 restaurants there. We've got space between the 2, and I think that's opportunity to provide something of a human scale that's comfortable, that's attractive, that's inviting. You're going to have people that arrive early on a sunny day. I'm going to assume that these are going to be wildly successful restaurants. They're going to arrive. There's going to be a bit of a line. They're going to get a little buzzer thingy bobby thing. They're going to go sit outside in the sunshine, or they're going to wait for friends to arrive or what have you. It's an opportunity to create a human space that I think would benefit both restaurants and be consistent with what else is happening on the site.
Like the pedestrian scale lighting.
Yes, lighting, benches, trash cans.
Right.
Yes.
Good point.
Right, okay. If we don't have any other comments from the commissioners, I think we're ready for a resolution on this to postpone, table it, and address the items that we discussed for both. Anybody want to take a shot at the resolution? Mr. Grant.
Resolve the preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Yard House Restaurant and Seasons 52 Restaurant located on the northeast corner of Big Beaver and Crooks 950 and 1000 West Big Beaver, Section 21, within the Big Beaver district, be postponed for the following reasons. Resubmit landscape plan that is consistent with the approved concept plan for parking lots south of restaurant pads, incorporate streetscape program from Big Beaver, provide dumpster screening details, resubmit photometric plan, provide more information on proposed uplights, revise elevations based on the code and comments from the Planning Commission, revise building entrance for Seasons 52 to make it more distinguishable from Crooks Road, and meet transparency requirements for Seasons 52 and Yard House.
Could we also incorporate public art?
Yes, I'll add that.
Okay.
Any other additions?
Anything else you want to add to that? Nothing? Moved by Mr. Krent and seconded by Ms. Koopa. The roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Apahedian?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Resolution is postponed. Item is postponed until,
And it was not postponed to a date specific. It's really dependent on how quickly we can get revised plans. We'll turn them around as quickly as we can and keep them moving.
sure. Item number,
Before,
yes, Mr. Edmonds.
Brad, one of the things, does this preclude them from doing any kind of preliminary infrastructure work at that site right now, until we take this up again? Because very frankly, I think we're very, the next time we meet, we'll be close to agreement, but, we're ending the construction season, and I don't know if they
Well,
wanted to do something.
We may be looking for a solution where there's no problem.
Okay.
Could I ask the engineer to come to the podium? But this postponement, does it set you back?
From my understanding, it was Darden's intent that construction was to start next year. We were trying to get all the necessary permits lined up over the winter.
Okay.
I guess Jim may be able to speak better to that since he's a representative from Darden, but that was my understanding, that construction would start maybe next year, around spring.
Yeah, we're, would obviously love to be under construction now, but I think with the winter approaching, we'll probably, maybe next spring is kind of what we're targeting. Okay. If we can get, I think our latest was that we would open about a year from now. So I don't think it's like killing us, but it's,
Right.
we want to get it right, so.
We will process you in a timely manner. But in terms of, this isn't a major setback that you got postponed tonight, you're okay, you can address these comments very quickly and get them back to us?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Right.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Eck?
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Do we happen to split the two buildings, maybe? Get one of them moving? Or because it's the
It's
same
two
site?
applications. It's two. It gets awkward because there's one site plan, there's one, so I suppose it sounds like you're concerned, I'm under the assumption that you've got a very competent staff, very confident crew here, and you've heard what the Planning Commission and staff have suggested. You're going to make your best effort to come back with revised plans, and at the next meeting, we're good to go. So if that happens, you're cool, right?
Well, my issue is I have one side that I'm addressing, while Seasons may
Yeah.
have an entire building. So my revision is going to be a lot less.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying from my time standpoint of, I want to get a permit, but I can't because the site plan is not there. So I'm just seeing where it's going to put my timeline back.
And I don't know if this matters, but we have two leases. They're two separate leases with two separate entities. It's not It's not,
Yeah.
it's not, one lease. It's-
My scope of work's
So-
got the dumpster in it and the site lighting through the alley, while Seasons has the other half.
Yeah. It-
The curb in, like the front parcel that you're talking about, all that landscaping's the landlord. So we're
Yeah.
only curb in, so we kind of have to get all entities together to discuss.
Now, we are planning on taking advantage of building them both at the same time, but it may also be different general contractors for each building. We may have one, and I'll have to talk to the VP of construction about that, but
I guess-
we're trying to, take advantage of the economies of
Yeah,
scale. So.
it's a little confusing because there's shared parking and there's shared utilities and they're separate but together, right? So I guess we'll work with you as much as we can, but I'm confident that you're going to come back at the next meeting, you're going to pay attention to what was said tonight, and it's going to be a moot point.
Absolutely. Yep, and I'll bring our architect, or Mr. DeGagne will. One of us will be here, but the CISA 52 architect will be here as well. And, I think we can hopefully satisfy the concerns. So, again, thank you for the feedback.
Thank you. Item number 7, conditional rezoning. Conditional rezoning application file number CRJP CR2016-002. Proposed IHOP restaurant and retail east side of Rochester, north of Big Beaver, 1033 Urban Crest, 3130 Rochester, and 3132-3142 Rochester, Section 23, from R1E, One Family Residential District, to GB General Business District. Mr. Carlisle.
If we were familiar with the last site, we should be very familiar with this site. I don't, unless it's the purview or the pleasure of the Planning Commission, I don't propose to go into a lot of detail. This site has been in front of the Planning Commission numerous times. The Planning Commission last considered this at the October 10th, 2017 meeting, and at that time, the application was postponed for 4 distinct items. The first was in regards to the Panda Express elevations. The elevations that were submitted at that meeting included a lot of EFS and not of the quality that the Planning Commission had expected or desired. We do note the applicant has revised the elevations for Panda Express. The revised elevations include a robust use of stone veneer, fiber cement wall panels, and composite wood. The elevations were included in the packet for your review, and there are renderings in front of you tonight for consideration. The second item for discussion was stormwater best management practices. Mr. Baker, the applicant, has brought his civil engineer to discuss that item before you, and so I will defer all discussion to his civil engineer to discuss that. The third is regards to the garbage dumpster enclosure and the trash pickup operations. The applicant has submitted a letter from his trash contractor, as well as his food delivery vendor, who notes that deliveries will be contained between the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And the applicant has provided letters and verified that he will submit that as a condition of approval. In addition, the applicant has provided screening for the trash enclosures, and those were included in your packet for review. The last item was an understanding of the parking study methodology. As we noted, the applicant is seeking relief from the parking requirements. It was reviewed by the city's traffic engineer as well as the city's traffic engineering consultant. They do note that this is a very unique use. The applicant has provided information from existing IHOP facilities which confirm that affirm that finding, and the city's traffic engineer and consultant does recommend approval of the shared parking and the shared parking methodology. However, the Planning Commission had asked for a little more information in regards to how the methodology is formed, and the applicant's traffic engineer is also here to discuss the shared parking methodology. So those were the 4 items for discussion: elevations, stormwater management, trash pickup and operations, and lastly, the parking study methodology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle from the Planning Commissioners? We have no questions, and I see the applicant is here.
Thank you, members of the commission. Mr. Chairman, my name is John Baker. Good to be here again before you. We tried to bring more exhibits to better explain the project as was communicated to us last time, but more importantly, bringing a civil engineer who did really let her describe it, but Jennifer Shehab is here with F&V Engineering to discuss her review of our stormwater management design. If you recall, those of you who were here last time, we had addressed that with the design engineer. Options were not forthcoming by him, so rather than going back to him, I went to a different engineer to actually evaluate our design, criticize it, improve it, and then bring those findings here tonight. So Jennifer is here to speak to that. And then on the parking study, Julie Kroll, also from F&V Engineering, did not only the interface with the city's engineer, but also with the city's outside consulting engineer, worked that methodology, and also did the study herself. So Julie's intimate with the findings of the parking study. The Panda elevations, which you were very specific about in the last hearing, dealt also with the use of EFIS. It took several weeks for their senior management. I'm sympathetic to your prior applicant talking about brand presidents and all that good stuff, but it took us a couple of weeks to get the Panda, I believe the president of Panda or their brand manager on this particular concept to acquiesce. So we got them to take off the use of EFIS entirely. And for review, we don't have an EFIS on our building either when we started in that position, but they've got it completely removed. And more importantly, what I was trying to make sure we did is have some continuity between some of the materials and the color palette. And we were able to get them to use our stone veneer, so there's continuity on the stone veneer between the retail and the IHOP building. The color palette is complementary. And again, the use of, or the discontinuing the use of the EFIS. So we rendered their building. Their materials board and sample board is here. I had difficulty getting some of the materials in the short order, but I tried to give you clear representation of what that was with application pictures and other installations. Enlarge these for the benefit of the commission, and really with that I would like to invite Julie or Jennifer, Jennifer, why don't you come up first? Jennifer's going to talk to the stormwater management questions that you had last time.
Good evening. I saw Phil the other night and told him I'd be here, and unfortunately he told me he wouldn't, so these are usually his comments.
Goes on his record.
What's that?
Goes on his record.
I know. Strike against Phil, finally. So I reviewed the geotechnical report that was provided by Panda Express, as well as Fairway Engineering's plans where they document the volume of stormwater management on the site. Review of the geotechnical engineering report really limited the BMPs available to this site. The groundwater elevation is only 2.5 to 4 feet below the ground, so any sort of bioretention would actually have standing water in it. You'd have some groundwater in it. So we had some issues with that, as well as pervious pavement. We have the same situation. So we'd be under draining and really not effectively using those sorts of things, which I know we had discussed at the previous. So when we took a look at that, we didn't really recommend rain gardens or bioswales for those reasons, as well as the pervious pavement. But we started looking at the structural BMPs, and really there's some hydrodynamic devices you can install, known as AquaSwirl or StormScepter. StormScepter actually meets the requirements for total suspended solids that the City of Troy is going to. So that would be the recommendation for this site. So it would be a water quality element that's a structural BMP. Looking at some of the others, this site doesn't support, and in addition to the high groundwater table, the soils are clays. They're sandy clays, but they're still clays. So we really don't have any infiltration benefits in this vicinity of the city. I really feel like you would, if you tried to implement some of that, you would have a lot of standing water on the site, and you really wouldn't be addressing the issues. And some of the issues we heard in the first proposal were standing water and mosquitoes would just be prevalent here. So I really think that the best recommendation for this site is going to be the StormScepter product, which meets the total suspended solids. Some of the others aren't as effective at it, so that's the product that I would recommend for this site. I don't know if you have any questions about
I do.
Yes.
Yes.
I heard what you said, but I didn't understand a word of what you said.
Okay, so
Be real basic for me as to how this is going to work.
So basically what happens is in the downstream pipe, you have a structural, there's a structure in that has a baffle in it, so the water hits it and it swirls around and the solids settle out. So you will have a maintenance element. Typically, you have an annual maintenance where they come in and they just vector it out. It's basically like a catch basin. And then, so after the water swirls, it goes over the weir, and so clean water discharges from the site. And the suspended solids are settled out in the bottom of the basin.
Does it go into the storm system, or is there a retention pond?
It's directly in line with your stormwater, your pipe. So the pipe comes in on one side, they're offset, so it creates a vortex, and the vortex allows the solids to settle to the bottom of the structure and then discharge out through the pipe. So this would be on the downstream pipe from your site. And the structural BMP it's about an $18,000 to $20,000 item. So this is not a small investment in the site and the stormwater quality that the developer is making.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Dagan.
Yes.
Tell me the advantage of using this piece of equipment. Well, I mean, okay, so you
It has no moving parts.
Well, why is this the recommendation? I guess, unfortunately, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I didn't hear all of the discussion on stormwater, but...
It's really a water quality element.
Water quality, okay.
Right. So you have, the engineer, Fairway Engineering, has designed volume of stormwater detention on the site, but that's not a stormwater quality. That's just a stormwater quantity.
Right.
So this would address the stormwater quality discharging from the site.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Mr. Grant.
To just continue on what Mr. Hudson said, I understood some of what you said, but you used some lingo that's to your profession. What's a BMP?
Well, BMP is your term. It's a best management practice for
okay.
stormwater quality and control.
Okay.
So that would be your bioswales, your rain gardens, those types of
I
features.
just want to know what BMP was because it could be a bike.
That's engineer jargon.
That's BMX.
So is
Are there any other questions?
in terms of maintenance of this product, is the owner responsible for that?
The owner would be responsible. I would assume that, they would have their catch basins on an annual maintenance where they have to come out and vector them out to maintain them, and then they would just add their storm scepter to that as well. And it's very similar. You pop the cover off, you vector it out.
Yeah, Troy does that on a regular basis through all the storm drain systems. And in front of my house, they come out every year and vector out the...
Right.
Same principle.
Yep.
And they treat them for mosquitoes probably as well.
Don't know, but that big truck comes out and sucks away.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is, as far as the water, we talked at the last time we got together about this. Troy allows 18 inches of standing water in parking lots, and that's up to the, in many cases, into the car.
Right.
Will this solution that you're proposing eliminate that?
No, we're still proposing on parking detention, but when you look at where your spaces are versus where your catch basins are in the center where the driving aisles are. So if you're getting out of your car in the space, typically, and the engineering designs are so preliminary right now, there isn't a contour for where the storage elevation will be. I think they're proposing like 13 inches or something, but it'll typically be in the driving aisle and not in the parking spaces.
If I may add, the only problem with that is, if you're coming out of one of these buildings and you're parking the other side of the parking lot, you better have some boots with you.
Right.
Can't get around that, huh?
It meets your engineering ordinance, so.
Well,
Go ahead. I'm done.
So is the retention approach to store it all in the parking lot, or is there some stored in the pipe as
A
well?
portion is in the pipe, so there's a restricted outlet, and a portion of the storage is in the pipe, and then the remainder of the volume is on the parking lot.
So
Because you recently went from a 10-year storage to 25-year event for new development, so you have increased, you probably could have gotten a 10-year all in the pipe, but now you have a 25-year storage requirement, so.
Okay. So the 13 inches is
Is your
considering the
increase.
pipe storage.
It's a combination of
increase.
pipe and on parking,
Okay,
yes.
okay. All right, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I think that answers all the questions regarding storm water.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Julie Kroll with Fleece and Vandenbrink. I'm the traffic engineer. I'm here to answer any questions you have about the parking study that we did for this. I just want to kind of give an overview of the methodology that we used for the parking study. So this is, I feel like we've been doing this for a year now, almost.
We have.
We originally, and it was in the winter, we started and we met with your staff and OHM to go over and figure out a scope for the study. And we actually felt, because the IHOP is a different type of restaurant than your Applebee's or, that sort, that it had a different parking demand and during the different days of the week, it had a different parking demand. So to really figure out what the demand for this particular site was, we surveyed 3 similar IHOP sites. And we actually gave the list to OHM, and they gave us, and they said, yep, we agree with all these sites, go out. So we went out and did a survey of parking demand for these sites on their peak day, and we adjusted it for the sales, and seasonal adjustment was applied to all of that parking, so we could get a true peak for the IHOP that's going in here. So we worked very closely with the city staff and your consultants to get to that right number. So that was the number that we used to figure out the parking demand for the IHOP. For the other land uses on the site, we went straight up ordinance rates. So when we're figuring out the parking, the only thing that was different from ordinance calculations was the IHOP. So once we put all of that in, so we took the IHOP rate that we calculated, and then we took the ordinance rate, and we calculated out just straight up, if they were all peaking at the exact same time on a weekend, you'd have a peak parking demand of 119 spaces. But then your ordinance also says you can take that peak demand and put it in the ULI, which is the Urban Land Institute. They have because the IHOP's going to peak at a certain time on a Sunday, whereas it's not going to be the same time as, the Panda Express or the Office. So when we put them in this model, we're able to say, okay, the peak is different times, and that's their shared parking. So we're allowed to overlap the parking because Panda Express at 10 in the morning on a Sunday isn't going to have the same demand as the IHOP does. So we can share those spaces, and vice versa, the Panda on a Friday night is going to be busier than the IHOP on a Friday night. So we put it in the spreadsheet, and it models it out, and the results show that the peak shared parking demand was 108 spaces. So they're providing 120. So it still doesn't meet ordinance, but as far as the demand, there'll be a surplus of parking on site.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson.
Yeah, I looked at the studies you had, and it seemed to me you were missing something. And that was all your studies started in the morning and stopped at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And there's nothing going forward with that. I wasn't able to tell from your study if these comparable sites were comparable. I know this site is at Rochester Road and Big Beaver, a steady stream of traffic. I don't know if our comparables met that situation. And then we've got an empty building in here, presumably for retail. But I think you got to know what that retail business is. If, for instance, there is a marijuana shop in that 4,000 square feet, traffic is going to be substantially different than a regular retail establishment. So I guess I've got some questions on whether or not the results that you achieved are really accurate.
So as far as your first question about determining which site, so there's some proprietary data that we had to vet offline with OHM, and so we sent that to them directly to review and approve the use of these sites. And city staff was okay with that process, given the proprietary nature of the data that we provided them. It was sales data for these other IHOP sites, and based on the size and the sales and the hours of these sales, they determined the hours that we should evaluate. So that was all vetted with the city. So
that's why I'm questioning it.
Question on that.
Go ahead.
Just like, not, because I know you had a multi-part question, but On that question, so what was the universe of IHOPs that you looked at when you selected these three?
So we looked at the IHOPs in southeast Michigan that were standalone stores. So because if they were combined with something else, it was going to be really hard for us to determine the parking demand for IHOP versus whatever else was in that site. So it had to be a standalone IHOP, similar in size, that was part of this same Trinity restaurant group that we could, because we didn't want to go out to somebody else's site and sit there for hours counting cars. So so we get in similar sales data, similar type clientele, and we provide that information. There was 4 sites, one of which was OHM said, no, we don't like this one, but we like these 3. Go ahead and survey these 3.
I thought you owned, how many IHOPs does the group control in southeast Michigan?
13.
But you submitted 4 for the study?
Well, like I said, some of them are like this particular site that are combined with other land uses, so it would have been really hard for us to figure out a parking demand for the IHOP versus whatever else was going on, so it had to be a standalone store. So he may have 13 stores, but of those stores, it had to be comparable size, similar operations to what's going on here.
Okay, my last question. So the Royal Oak store doesn't fit that criteria?
The Royal Oak store was small.
Doesn't fit that criteria, and Bloomfield Hills, those 3 don't?
Uncharacteristically small in Royal Oak. That's probably one of the reasons they didn't pick that one. Bloomfield, I don't recall what would have bounced that one out. And I just don't know. There are others. There's a variety of layouts out there. There's shared parking was the main thing that we were trying to achieve. In the case of Royal Oak, for example, there's a lot of shared parking with the center next to us because there's no barrier to the West Park. So if you're familiar with it, you know what I'm talking about.
I asked the question because I go to the Royal Oak one and I tend to have to park.
Yeah.
In the other lot.
And it's a very uncharacteristic scenario there because this lot doesn't have that option. There's not a shopping center next door that you could mooch into, which is one of the criteria that they had to control, one of the controllables they had to have.
So a lot of thought did go into picking these sites and which times of the day and when to do all that.
So I'm a really simple planner, so math confuses me, right? So I'm not a traffic engineer, but I can tell you that there was a lot of collaboration between the 2 sides, between F&V and between our traffic engineer and OHM, and we wanted to make sure that it was a fair representation. So what we didn't want was not that they would, but we didn't want F&V cherry picking the sites that were going to work and the times and the days that were going to work. So again, they picked 4 sites. Our consultant, for reasons that I can't really speak to because I bumped 1, so down to 3. And then to verify that we got the time right, Mr. Baker was kind enough to open his books and share his receipts with our side to make sure that they weren't cherry picking the times that were going to work. So we did get kind of a realistic kind of worst case scenario examples, and as a result, we came up with a study that our consultant has agreed with, and we support our consultant's findings.
Thank you for that clarification.
I think there were
Yes, Mr.
other
Faison.
aspects of Mr. Hudson's question that maybe we didn't answer.
Can I comment on one of Mr. Hudson's questions? And you questioned the sales data stopped, I think it was the count stopped at 1 o'clock.
Yes.
A bulk of our sales take place, I can't tell you if it's 65 or 67%, but it takes place before 2 o'clock. So the sales data that we gave to the engineers showed that drop off, and they made that cutoff. We didn't stop giving data at 1 o'clock. They made that cutoff based on the sales data that we
I
provided.
understand that, but from my perspective, it's an incomplete study because you did that. You cut it off. I'd like to know what happens in the afternoon.
We didn't cut it off.
Well, you're proposing a study that you approve, which cut it off.
We could have continued to count past 1 o'clock, but it would have showed a significant drop-off in parking demand, so it really wouldn't have affected the results of our study, because it evaluated the peak.
That's the conclusion you're assuming is true.
Well, anytime we count, it costs a lot of money. So, to continue to count when we don't need to count,
That's your conclusion. You didn't.
Right, and, well,
that I needed that information.
We couldn't provide the information because it was proprietary in the study, but we did provide it to OHM, for them to approve the time window. So they looked at all the data, just as we looked at the data, and they said, just like they would ask us to count traffic from 7 to 9 and 4 to 6, they asked us to count these cars from 10 to 1.
I understand your explanation. I'm just not satisfied.
So I guess just to clarify, you had sales data for the entire day, including evening, but you chose to cut it off at 1 p.m. because of the peak being up to that time and not in the evening. Am I making an accurate?
This was a decision that was, the city asked us to collect data between 10 and 1 at these locations for use in our study, based on the sales data that they provided for the entire day, for the entire week, for every month of the year.
So that data was available, but then the recommendation was to stop the study at 1 p.m. because the peak was up to 1 p.m. and you made the call that beyond 1 p.m. you wouldn't have a peak anyway beyond 1 p.m.
Correct. Just like any study for traffic, we wouldn't evaluate 24 hours worth of data. We would evaluate the peak periods, because that would give you the peak. So we're really only looking for your peak hour of that peak day.
Okay. Does that clarify things for you, Mr. Hudson?
Well, I understand
why they
everything. I just
stopped
said
it?
I'm not satisfied. I don't think it was a thorough enough study. Who knows what would happen in the afternoon? They say your sales receipts, maybe somebody else is parking in there at that time.
I guess they're saying that they know what's happening based on the sales data, and they made the call.
Well, I understand what they're
stop the
saying.
study at 1
I
p.m.
just disagree with their methodology.
Yes,
I just want to make a point, and maybe I've misheard you, but you've said several times this wasn't your decision. This was a decision of the city or the city's consultant.
Correct.
So if we have a problem with where the time stopped, it isn't with this petitioner. It's with the city.
Well, I'm not pointing the finger at anybody in particular. I'm just saying the whole study is flawed.
But it's their study that you're picking on, and it wasn't their parameters.
I'll
It was
share the
city's.
blame then with the city and OHM.
Yes, Mr. Phelan.
I had a question on the page where you talk about the average peak parking demand on a Sunday, and you line up the restaurants, the Novi, Monroe, and Roseville. And in Novi, you have the adjusted peak at 64, so I think that's a 64 spot requirement. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
And there's 61 parking spaces there. Is that right?
Yes, so Novi is an interest, have you been to the Novi site?
No.
So Novi, actually, they have a little bit of shared parking with their neighbor that's a florist, and the florist is closed on Sunday.
Okay, so I was curious how you could have more.
Yeah, they're just kind of like the Royal Oak site, where they kind of bleed over. So the peak demand was that day, and they kind of bleed over into the florist.
Then I have one more question on that page. If you go across, the average per seat is 0.39 in Novi. It's 0.25 in Monroe. So less required parking, right? Am I reading that right, for Monroe?
Yes.
And then 0.36 in Roseville. And so the question is that variance for Monroe significant enough to make that maybe not a comparable to the other two?
Monroe was
because you got one spot, right, of room for the IHOP alone. So if the average was 0.39 or 0.36, I don't think you would have enough parking. So again, I wonder if the Monroe is skewing the results.
even if the number was slightly higher, we're still looking at a shared parking and not a peak parking. So we're still at 108 with 12 surplus. So even if I marginally change that, we're still going to have adequate parking.
Yeah, I'm just focused on the IHOP parking. Right, understood.
Ms. Cooper?
Did Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Saudat have something to say? Because I kind of saw you pulling the mic and then...
Well, we whisper back and forth a lot to each other. No, but to follow up to Mr. Hudson's question about the other use in the center, the parking study based that on general retail, which was one space every 250 square feet of floor area. If there is another tenant that has a higher parking demand in that 4,000 square feet, the applicant would be required to submit a revised parking study, which the city would then evaluate again. That's not unusual how we handle situations where a shared parking relief is given by the Planning Commission. For example, there was a shared parking relief given for the Galleria project, which is the Carrabba's, the Bonefish. The applicant, the shared parking agreement approved by the Planning Commission showed general retail for one of the spaces. Well, the applicant came in and wanted to put in a food user there. After many reiterations and go back and forth between the applicant and the city, they had to submit another revised parking study that showed that parking would work even with the higher intense use than what the Planning Commission had originally approved as part of the parking study. So all that being said, if this parking study is accepted by the Planning Commission and the conditional rezoning does move forward to the City Council, any parking demand greater than what is agreed upon by this parking study will require a new parking study if the use is higher than the parking requirement for that 4,000 square foot retail center.
Thank you.
Just a question. You say if the demand is greater.
By the ordinance requirement. The ordinance has a minimum parking spaces required based on a square footage for most uses. Again, their set is 4,000 square feet divided by 250 is X amount of spaces, whatever that is. If they bring in another user that by ordinance requires more parking, they'd have to amend and revise that parking study. That parking study would be reviewed by the city. The city can either say, no, it doesn't work, add more parking or reduce the square footage, or yes, it works, parking should be sufficient. So we set the bar at a certain point, but any revisions to that requires an amendment and a review by the city.
Thanks for the clarification. I was asking, so if the IHOP is more popular than the three that we've selected, and there's more parking demand for the IHOP than the study shows, there's no redress for that?
Well, what would happen probably is if they come in and for a different user for that retail, part of this parking study, the revised one, would show that the parking demand is actually greater for the IHOP, and we wouldn't allow a user that requires more parking than what they originally were approved at.
No, understood.
Yes.
I was again just saying, if we approve the plan, it's built as specified, but the demand is greater than we expect for whatever reason, there's nothing we can do about that.
And that's the case for any site plan we approved. If a site plan we approve, we base it on best case scenario, or what we deem as the best case scenario and what we think. And if parking is greater than what is approved on a site plan, we can't go back and require them to put in additional parking.
Understand, I was just asking.
And I just want, for parking, we try to what we deem as right-size parking. We do not want to park sites based on the highest peak day, one day a year. Black Friday, we try to accommodate parking on average, typical day.
Mr. Edmonds.
And if it turns out that there's more parking required, or they're losing customers because they can't park there, then I would think a competent owner is going to propose a new parking plan that would accommodate the additional customers. They're not going to, they've got a huge amount of money invested in this project. Why would they just say, oh yeah, we're going to let all our customers go to cross the street?
I'm actually also more comfortable with what the applicant said about the combination of the uses creating some flexibility. And my questions are focused on the IHOP, but I think the combination of uses do provide some cushion.
Yeah, Mr. Sullivan.
So to reiterate, this is a collaborative effort. This was the most involved staff and our traffic consultant have been in a parking study in my career. We stand by our consultant who believes that the applicant has proved that it will park even at peak times. But let's assume that they're wrong. Again, I don't believe they are, but let's assume they're wrong. And someone comes to have a delicious breakfast at IHOP and they drive through the parking lot a couple times and they can't find a space. We heard residents of the residential property to the east tell us that there's no parking on their residential property. We also heard them tell us there's no parking on the street. They can't park at the fire station, they'll get ticketed. So there's no options here. They're gonna keep driving. They're gonna go up the road half a mile and go to another place. So the only loss here, because this has been designed safely and efficiently, this is not a safety issue, this is a business issue, and the person impacted is sitting in the audience, and he's going to lose a customer. That's the impact. So again, we support the findings of OHM, and we support this traffic study.
Okay, thank you. I think we've dissected this issue quite a lot, even at the last meeting and this meeting, and the study is very conclusive and very clear. I mean, the shared parking works, and your comment just, Mr. Savidan, just adds to solidify that hypothetically, if it doesn't, it's the owner's loss, and I don't think the owner would want to move forward with the parking design that from the get-go would be a detriment to his business model and to his success. So I think the data is clear, and personally, I'm confident in the study that it will work. Any other questions? Ms. Koopa?
Actually, a couple of things. One is, I'd like to ask our student rep if she's happy, because we've been talking about places where the young people in our community can go. So, Claire, what do you think?
Well, at the end of this, I was just going to ask when the timeline of this project would be, because I have friends who drive almost half an hour to go to the nearest IHOP, who have gone to Wayne State for Panda Express, so I know they'd be very excited about this project.
Thank you.
And my second question is actually not a question. As a mechanical engineer, it's nice to see two women engineers at the podium, so that was my second. And my third question is, may I propose a resolution?
Yes, you may, Ms. Koopa. I think we're good. We don't have any other comments.
Okay. If there's no other comments, the Planning Commission hereby, I'm just going to start with the resolution. The Planning Commission hereby recommends approval of a deviation of off-street parking requirements by approving 120 parking spaces when 155 spaces are required by zoning ordinance. This 35-space parking deviation is supported by a parking study completed by Fleiss and Vandenbrink and affirmed by the city's traffic consultant, OHM, as authorized by section 13.06F of the City of Troy zoning ordinance. Be it finally resolved that the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that the R1E to GB conditional rezoning request, which incorporates preliminary site plan approval as per section 16.04 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance, located on the east side of Rochester, north of Big Beaver, within section 23, being approximately 0.38 acres in size, be granted for the following reasons. Site design, and specifically the conditions offered by the applicant through the site plan, protects public health, safety, and welfare. The application is consistent with the master plan. Conditions offered by the applicant are consistent with the zoning district proposed. The site can be serviced with public facilities. And finally, the conditions offered by the applicant ensure compatibility with adjacent land uses and provides the appropriate transition features to mitigate impact of use, intensity, and massing.
I'll second.
Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Krent. Roll call, Ms. Sarnicki, please.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Chagel?
Yes.
Mr. Apahodian?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
No.
Motion passes. Moves on to the City Council. Final
Just one
approval.
final comment?
Yes.
I just want to applaud the applicant for a great job on the Panda, putting forth the effort to get Panda Express to use great materials that's going to really add to the site, and I really appreciate what you did.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, do you know about what time this project will be done?
Some of us are ready for waffles.
I'll take some pancakes right now.
We're actually preparing to submit, now, this might be news for Brent and staff, but we're actually preparing to submit improvement plans for the IHOP as early as this week. Panda is probably going to follow significantly, so the intent is to start construction in the spring. We also intend to get our demolition, the select demolition done almost immediately. So we're going to try to beat the weather a little bit on that and be ready to really hit the site work in the spring when it changes.
Can I just say that the police officers in the city are thrilled to have someplace they can go at 2 o'clock in the morning, so fingers crossed that,
Thank you
council.
very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Demo, but that's it.
Item number 8 on the agenda, public comment for items on the agenda. I don't see anybody else in the audience that wants to speak on any item tonight. Then we'll move to item number 9 on the agenda, Planning Commission comment. I guess we'll start with Ms. Sarnicki. Any comment? There.
No
Mr.
comment.
Edmonds, Mr. Hudson.
No comment.
Mr. Hudson.
Yeah, I drove by on Beach Road this week, the project by Mr. Miniacci at the corner. And I was absolutely delighted to see what's going on. He's got some beautiful stonework in there for planters. And this is the first time I've ever seen him plant trees and shrubs in a retention pond. I think it's a great idea. So kudos to him.
Great.
Ms. Cooper.
At the moment, no. I had something I had in my mind at the beginning of the meeting, but I've forgotten. We've had quite a ride here. So maybe I'll save it for next time.
Mr. Tagle.
I'm good, thanks.
Mr. Phelan.
Nothing from me.
Nothing
for me.
Nothing?
You were going to talk about a housing seminar.
Actually, no, I was going to say what a nice article that was in Our Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. There you go.
Yeah. Did I nail it? I mean,
Yes, you did.
Absolutely.
good.
Well done.
And I appreciated the fact that the reporter actually did a nice job also, because when you say something to a reporter, if they don't get it right and they portray what you said in a skewed fashion, it makes the city look bad. But I do have to appreciate that she also gave us the facts, and I would wish that I could put a copy of that magazine in everyone's hands in Troy, because it's very informative.
So just for conversation, that was almost 5 hours of interviews for that, just myself alone. I did provide, it was a he actually, Lou Blouin is the reporter. I did provide him with contact information for Mr. Waddles and Ms. Stein, so that he wanted to provide a balanced portrayal of the issue. I think he did a good job. From my standpoint, when you're interviewed like that for a story that length, you're kind of putting yourself out there. And he told me initially, he says, "I'm not looking for a gotcha here. I want to capture what you're saying." And I thought he was very fair. So I was very happy. Mr. Hudson, good observation on Parkview on Beach, our first cluster. Those plants, it was interesting because I got a phone call from a landscape architect. He says, "I've got a bunch of plants, a plant list for you for the detention basin. I want to make sure that you're okay with it." And I thought, so I checked, and there was no plants proposed for the detention basin. No. He proposed bioretention, but he didn't give us the plants at the time. So he gave us a fantastic list, and I confirmed with Kurt Bovenseep, who's a horticulturalist, to make sure that it was going to work. And it's pretty impressive what they planted in there. It really is.
Yeah.
So
We give him a hard time sometimes, but this time he did all right.
he did a good job, for sure.
And a nice cameo shot of you at Starbucks.
So I know it's late, but I got to tell you. So I was told they were going to fact check everything I said. So I got an email with 100 questions. Is it true you've never been to an Outback? Is it true you've never? So I had to answer all these questions, and he told me that he was going to have a photographer come out. So I dressed in a suit, and I went and I met him at Starbucks, and he took pictures for 2.5 hours. And one of the photos that I was taking, I literally stood in the median of Big Beaver with my hands in my pockets, and he had a drone with a camera, And he got all of the Big Beaver corridor behind me with cars zipping by, and I was standing there. It was hot. I was sweating. And for 45 minutes, I was in the median with cars zipping by with this drone taking pictures of me. And then when it came out, someone told me, maybe you're going to be on the cover. I said, oh, please, not the cover. You don't want this mug on the cover. So when it came out and I saw that little picture, it was like, that was 2.5 hours. I could have taken that with a cell phone, with a selfie. But anyways, it
They
turned
took
out.
all of that in one visit, the pictures?
No, it was
the
three.
5-hour?
It was 3 different interviews totaling almost 5 hours. Then the fact checking, and then the photograph. Yeah.
Well, you did yourself proud.
And the city,
Well,
too.
And the city,
well,
really.
It's a team effort. I'm one piece of the puzzle, and you're also a piece of the puzzle. So.
Thank you, Mr. Carla.
Notice there was no one else in the team mentioned the article. It was just the Brent Salvadon show.
I did mention you, but it was somehow left out of the call. I don't know what happened there.
You ended up on the cutting room floor.
No comment. Other than that.
Okay, thank you. And I have, yes,
Before-
Mr. Edmonds.
Brad, can you just summarize what the city council meeting did last night? Because I think some of the members of the planning commission would be interested in that.
Yeah. So you talk about the town center?
Yeah.
They basically.
And the meetings that were being.
So as you know, there was a ballot proposal it was in the Hour magazine article. The proposal failed. There was 50% no votes, I believe, was the final tally. So had it passed, it would have had the effect of essentially terminating the town center project. Because it failed, the project can move forward. And City Council talked about kind of regrouping and coming up with what direction do they want to proceed in? Do they want to continue with the RFQ? How do they want to proceed with the town center project? So they talked about scheduling a special meeting in the future to talk about that. They also talked about rescheduling the joint meeting with the Planning Commission. That was postponed. And they also talked about a special meeting of council to talk about medical marijuana, which is an issue right now. So look for those 3 meetings in the future.
Yeah, Ms. Kuba.
For those of us who are over 50, there's actually a survey the city of Troy has out there. I will send it to Mr. Savanant, but if everyone over 50 could fill out that survey. Sorry, Claire. But it's I think, to start gaining public opinion about things. So I think we should weigh in.
Who put the survey out?
Was it
Parks and Rec. Parks and
Yeah,
Rec
Parks
survey.
and Rec survey.
Okay, thank you. I have no comment. If we have nothing else, then we are adjourned. Thank you.